5,000 years ago, on the land that is now Iraq, four great cultures drove a long process of civilization. The Sumerian culture, Akkadian culture, Assyrian culture, and Babylonian culture built humanity as oldest kingdoms and empires, which we today collectively refer to as Mesopotamian civilization. This Greek term Mesopotamia refers to the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, also known as the Fertile Crescent. It was in this central region that residents of the two river valleys established humanity's earliest cities, towering temples, and luxurious palaces like desert oases. The history, politics, society, and cultural development of Mesopotamia originated with the Sumerians, a people who have completely vanished without any genetic ties to other peoples. The Sumerian language is an isolated tongue, unrelated to any other known languages, making them one of the most mysterious groups in human history. They were also the earliest inhabitants of Mesopotamia, settling there during the Neolithic period and forming villages around 7,500 BCE, nearly 10,000 years ago, when humans elsewhere were still living as hunter-gatherers. Sumerians had already established cities along the two rivers. Between 5,000 to 3,750 BCE, the largest city of Sumer was Eridu in today's Diqr province of Iraq. Hence historians call this period the Ubaid period, from 3,750 to 3,150 BCE. It became Uruk in today's Methana province, leading to the Uruk period. Founded around 5000 BCE, Uruk reached its zenith around 3200 BC and produced many legendary kings recorded in the Sumerian king list, with Gilgamesh being the most famous, who ascended to the throne around 2650 BCE. The Epic of Gilgamesh is one of humanity's earliest heroic epics. However, whether Gilgamesh truly existed remains a mystery. Archaeology confirms that Uruk was abandoned only in the 3rd century AD, making it a city that lasted for over 5,000 years and setting a record in human history. It was also around this time, circa 3000 BCE, that humanity's earliest writing system, cuneiform, emerged as an indispensable marker of civilization. Mesopotamian civilization is typically considered to have officially begun with the advent of cuneiform. Uruk wasn't the only powerful city-state in Mesopotamia at this time. There were 18 major cities covering approximately 30,000 square kilometers. Among them, Lagash and Umma to the southeast of Uruk competed for dominance over Mesopotamia for centuries. Particularly strong was whose power is evident from excavated artifacts, and it indeed replaced Uruk's regional supremacy around 2550 BCE. However, regardless of who held the reins, these Sumerian city-states remained independent until a rising Akkadian city-state conquered all others with military force, uniting them into one large empire. Note that while those city-states were founded by Sumerians, the Akkadians were established by another Mesopotamian people, speaking Semitic languages, ancestors of Jews and Arabs. The Semites who conquered the Sumerian states were called Akkadians because they built this city-state, hence historians refer to them as such. Thus, it was the Akkadian people, not the Sumerians, who became humanity's first empire builders. Their ruler, Sargon of Akkad, is considered the world's first emperor, establishing the Akkadian Empire with its capital in Akkad. The empire implemented a governor system where each city-state had a governor and was protected by a unified army to ensure stability. The ancient Sumerian city-states, which had never been controlled before, now found themselves under strict rule politically, religiously, economically, and culturally, bearing heavy taxes and conscription duties, leading them to rebel. However, these rebellions were brutally suppressed, with many cities sacked. Around 2160 BCE, the Akkadian Empire fell due to an invasion by the Zagros Mountains, Gushans, allowing Sumerian city-states a brief revival. However, in the late 21st century BCE, land salinization and nomadic invasions led to food crises, ultimately destroying Sumerian civilization amidst internal strife and external threats. In 2004 BCE, Elamites from Iran sacked Ur and captured the last Sumerian king, marking the end of humanity's first civilization. In the 19th century BCE, another Semitic group settled in Mesopotamia after the Akkadians, the Amorites. They expelled the Sumerians from their city-states. Then the Amorites took over and established their own governments in these city-states that originally belonged to the Sumerians. Although each of these Amorite city-states was independent, they were still closely connected by a common language and culture, kind of like ancient Greece later on. During this period, some powerful city-states included Izin, Larsa, Assyria, and Babylon, etc., so who eventually came out on top and unified Mesopotamia again? It was Babylon. Around 1792 BC to 1750 BC, King Hammurabi of Babylon united Mesopotamia through a series of military campaigns following in the footsteps of Sargon of Akkad, and also promulgated the world's first written legal code, the Code of Hammurabi. Unfortunately, though Hammurabi's Babylonian empire was short-lived. Shortly after his death, it declined rapidly due to foreign invasions, losing conquered territories one by one until it shrank back down to just the city of Babylon. Then in 1595 BC, even Babylon itself fell to the Hittites, and ancient Babylonia officially came to an end. After the fall of ancient Babylonia, Mesopotamia once again entered a period where many small states were established by various ethnic groups on this land, such as the Hittite kingdom founded by the Hittites and the Mitanni kingdom established by the Hurrians. In this chaotic era, Assyria, which had lost to Babylon in the previous round of competition, unexpectedly rose up again. In 1363 BC, King Ashur-uballit of Assyria overthrew the Mitanni kingdom, marking the beginning of Assyrian expansion. From 1363 BC to 911 BC, Assyria rapidly expanded its territory. Then from 911 BC to 612 BC, it reached its peak. This is when the largest and most infamous empire in human history emerged, the terrifying Assyrian Empire. Why does the Assyrian Empire leave such a purely negative impression? Mainly because this empire pursued brutal military expansion policies throughout its existence, not only failing to create any cultural achievements, but also destroying civilizations with every conquest and massacring cities upon capture. The entire country's economy was basically sustained by plundering and cheap slave labor from war captives. Especially during the reign of King Ashur-nasirpal from 883 BC to 859 BC. He not only expanded massively, but also established a terrifying regime, cruelly massacring all those who resisted. In 859 BC, Assyria further extended its empire into Syria and fought against the Kingdom of Israel, ultimately destroying it in 722 BC and exiling the Israelites, making Assyria one of the biggest villains in the Old Testament without question. Around the mid-7th century BC, with the Assyrian Empire relocating to Nineveh, its power reached its zenith, its territory expanded to its largest extent by 669 BC. However, as we can see from previous narratives, the strength of the Assyrian Empire was a disaster for Mesopotamia. Of course, if you insist on asking what contributions the Assyrian Empire made to human civilization, historians do list some points. It established the world's first standing army, wartime logistical support systems, and military roads. It was also one of the earliest empires to use siege towers, battering rams, catapults, and ladders in warfare, inventing tunnel warfare tactics, and being the first to extensively employ cavalry. But do these really count as contributions to civilization? While libraries with over 30,000 clay tablets containing historical, legal, medical, astrological knowledge, and epic poetry like the Epic of Gilgamesh can be considered a cultural achievement, most of this knowledge was plundered from conquered peoples. Therefore, I think the role of the Assyrian Empire as Mesopotamia's ultimate villain is irrefutable, because the Assyrian Empire positioned itself as the sole antagonist on this land once it reached its peak, surrounding nations immediately united to attack it. Sardanapalus was said to be the last king of Assyria, indulging in his harem and leading a decadent life. In 612 BC, when rebels from the Medes, Babylonians, and Persians stormed the palace, Realizing there was no hope for recovery, Sardanapalus ordered soldiers to kill all his wives and horses as sacrifices, which fits perfectly with the image of an Assyrian tyrant. In 626 BC, Nabopolassar, governor of Babylon, declared independence from Assyria and rebelled against it. By this time, Assyria was already in decline, so Babylon succeeded in its rebellion and joined forces with other ethnic groups to capture the Assyrian capital Nineveh in 612 BC. By 609 BC, remnants of Assyria were completely annihilated. The Neo-Babylonian Empire then replaced Assyria as the new hegemon of Mesopotamia. Nabopolassar's son Nebuchadnezzar II was the most powerful king in the history of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. His reign lasted from 605 BC to 562 BC, marking the empire's strongest period. Nebuchadnezzar pursued military expansion policies and controlled all of Syria, Palestine by 605 BC. Following Assyria's destruction of Israel in 722 BC, Nebuchadnezzar also destroyed the remaining kingdom of Judah in 597 BC, razing Jerusalem and burning Solomon's temple, exiling many Jews to Babylon. Known as the Babylonian captivity, apart from conquests and destruction, Nebuchadnezzar was also very concerned with urban construction, turning Babylon into a magnificent wonder city. His notable works include the Ishtar Gate, now housed in the Pergamene Museum in Berlin, and a palace built for his beloved wife Amytis. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. However, after Nebuchadnezzar II died in 562 BC, the Neo-Babylonian Empire quickly declined. Meanwhile, the neighboring Persian Empire rapidly expanded under the rule of Cyrus the Great. Less than 25 years after Nebuchadnezzar II's death, the Neo-Babylonian Empire was conquered by Cyrus the Great of Persia. For several centuries thereafter, Mesopotamia remained under Persian rule. The Persian Empire was an inclusive multi-ethnic state, and under its rule, Jews imprisoned in Babylon were released to return home, while the cultures of various ethnic groups in Mesopotamia were preserved and developed. However, in 331 BC, Alexander the Great conquered Persia, and Mesopotamia soon fell under the strong influence of Greek civilization and was assimilated. As the center of Mesopotamian civilization, Babylon gradually declined in the 2nd century BC. In the 1st century AD, with the abandonment of the last temple in Babylon and the loss of knowledge about scorpion flies, Mesopotamian civilization came to an end, becoming a thing of history. Nevertheless, its culture, law, science, and mythology continued to influence the entire world for thousands of years thereafter. In summary, this land of wonders witnessed the birth of humanity's first cities and states, the emergence of the first empires, and people living here created the earliest writing systems, laws, astronomical calendars, and mathematics, as well as magnificent architecture and engineering that are awe-inspiring. It is undoubtedly a cornerstone in world history.